Rosa here in the Rosa String Works workshop, and the fellow you see standing in the back here is Brent Dove, and his wife Jan is in the shop as well, but she's a little camera shy. Brent is staying at our rental retreat, and he brought me an instrument to work on. You know the old saying, you say tomato, I say tomato, you say potato, I say potato. Well, you say bouzouki, and I say bazooka, and I win every time on the bazooka, I guarantee you. You want to have a battle with your bouzouki against my bazooka? Anyway, he did. He brought me an Irish bouzouki. And I don't know much about these other than if you did hang them in a tree, a bird would build a nest in there, I guarantee you. But except you'd have to get rid of that little fancy thing over the hole there. Pretty cool little instrument, and it's made really nicely. You know, it looks good. I don't know if it's solid wood or if it's laminates. I couldn't tell you that without looking. Do you know, Brent?
I'm pretty sure it's solid wood.
Okay, it looks like it would be because the top is very nice looking, but that doesn't mean anything these days. They can put very nice wood on a laminate. Just from first glance on it, I don't know a whole lot about these. You know, if I was being critical on the first glance, I'd say the action's a little bit high. Then again, it may have to be that high because this is a very long scale here. I'm not sure if it's longer than a guitar or not, but it's probably pretty close. You know, guitar is about what, 25 1/4 approximately, something like that. This is 24 and a half. It looks like it's going to be about the scale of a guitar, roughly. But you say it's tuned. I don't even know that much about them. They're tuned more or less like an octave type mandolin. Or
it's a G-D-A-E, like a mandolin.
G-D-A-E.
But on an Irish bouzouki, it's tuned G-D-A-D.
G-D-A-D.
And that's because most all the songs are in D, and of course...
Well, how do you know this is Irish? I mean, like, I haven't heard it speaking anything with an Irish accent.
You're absolutely correct. It hasn't said a single thing.
Yeah.
So,
how do you know it's Irish?
Because
it says it inside there, doesn't it? It says Irish concert bouzouki.
That's what it says, the label.
Yeah, the label does say that. So I'm not good at reading, as you know. No, I just started looking at it here a minute ago. There is kind of a couple weird things. The tuning keys are on crooked. You can probably see that. You can see this one's kind of pointed down, this one's kind of pointed up, and you know, it's just kind of weird. This side here is fairly straight, but I can tell just from this side, I can tell this one's not perfect. It's close. I don't know where we're going with this yet, but we're going somewhere with it. I'll regroup here with Brent, and then we'll get back to you and show you what we're going to do. We've decided we're going to take the strings off and change the strings for sure, and while we've got those off, of course, we're going to see if we can't straighten out these crooked tuning keys. You got to wonder how that happened. I mean, a little crooked would be one thing, but these are pretty darn crooked. You can't hardly miss it. What I do is I just loosen the strings like this, and whenever you're going to change strings, you just want to get the tension off of them where they're not really making much sound, and then it's far quicker to just cut them off. And I'll just cut them off right about here. In this case, I think we're going to have a pickup through here, so there's a hole under here with a wire. I don't think you can see that very well. Since I don't have it in camera, you probably can't see it at all. But there it is right there. There's a pickup wire through there, so we can't really do a whole lot with moving that bridge around. Let's see if we can get the tail piece off of here. All the strings come off very easily that way. We'll probably put some padding inside of here too to dampen any sounds back in there. Sympathetic overtones and miscellaneous sundry sounds that you can get without padding in there. The reason I also cut them is because then it comes off much easier up here too. You can just unwind the string right up the post like that, and just saves a lot of time. Time is money, and Brent knows because he's paying. So there you go. Okay, we're going to tackle this first really bad one, the one that's really crooked. And I'm trying to find a screwdriver that fits these little screws. These are some really tiny screws. You know what? I'm glad I looked at that. They're all wallered out, every single one of them. Every single one of them has been wallered out. And when I say wallered out, that's an old country term meaning that somebody has messed them up big time. They're all rounded out, every one of them. Every single one of them. That's crazy. I've never seen that before. And I don't think this is a case of where they've got some weird head. They don't look like any kind of a weird head. They just look like a Phillips that's been rounded off. That is crazy. Well, that will stop us from undoing that very easily. There's always something, I don't know if you can see that or not, but every single one of them is rounded off on the inside. What I did was I grabbed a hold of the head of the screw with this and I started unscrewing it. Then I took a little tiny straight edge or straight screwdriver, kind of jam it in there, and it actually spins it, sort of. Anyway, we got that out. And this is the worst one for sure. The bad thing is when you put it about where it should be, it's splitting the hole, so that's always makes it more complicated. So what we'll do is we'll fill these holes with some toothpicks and glue. Shouldn't be too hard to do. I've loosened the other side of this so I can spin it around easier. The hole's, you know, fairly loose here. I don't know, one toothpick might be enough. I jam the toothpick in there as far as I can get it, and then I just break it off.
All over again. I'm blue for you, darling.
You really do have to fill a hole like that if you're going to just move it slightly, because your drill will follow that hole every time. I'm trying to see if I can jam the toothpick down in there again, and it's not really having that. I'll cut off what I can of that tooth, of the second attempt there. I think that will make it better. What I will try to do here is kind of split the difference. These other three are kind of in line, even though I don't think they're all that great. Like the distance between these two here is much less than the distance between here. And I'll just try to do my best here at lining these up. Looks like that's going to be about it right there. Really difficult to say where the best place is to put that. I don't think any one of those other three are exactly the same. So I'm just kind of splitting the difference here, making it look as good as I think I can make it look. Okay, and we'll get us a screw and we'll put that back in there. Well, my screw heads are slightly, and I say slightly, bigger than the other ones, but they're not stripped out, so we're gonna go with that. And actually what I'm going to do, and you've seen me do this before, anytime you're putting a new screw into a new hole, you should coat the threads with wax. And I've just got some beeswax here, and I'm coating these threads with beeswax. And you might say, well, why do you do that? Well, it just makes them go in the hole much smoother, much easier, with less friction, and you're less likely to twist the screw off or to create a problem with the screw head like we had here. Yeah, and you can see these are just driving in perfectly easy, really easy. Well, that definitely looks straighter to my eye. I don't see anything real bad now, although the spacing is just goofy. The spacing between these two here is less than the spacing between the other spots. We could go deeper and spend a lot of time and effort, but I don't see any point in doing that. I think we'll call that good enough. Well, I've checked the action here before I took the strings off of this, and the action at the 12th fret on the bass side was about 140 thousandths. On this side it was about 110. If we took 20 off of the treble side and, oh, let's see here, we're about 40 thousandths too high, about 80 thousandths off of this side, we'd be really close. 20 to about 80 thousandths is what we need to take off. Now the problem is, this is a very unique type of saddle that I'm not all that familiar with. I have a feeling the saddle is actually connected to the wire, but it may not be. It may just be sitting on top of a pickup. I'm not really sure how it's made. Yeah, it is just sitting on top of a pickup. Maybe this is thicker on this side. It is probably a little bit thicker on this side, but I noticed this was sitting up quite a bit higher than that side was. I see a solder piece right there where that could be sticking up, so I'm going to test that real quick and see if it is actually sticking up proud of the rest of it. It's kind of like a little solder BB where I'm sure the end of that wire is. And I'm just trying to see if it sticks up above it. No, it doesn't. It seems like it's about right. I'm just testing to make sure the pickup is down in there all the way. It feels like it is. So I think our only recourse is to cut some off the bottom of this. I'm not going to make a new saddle for this, well, unless the customer wants me to make one. I mean, I could make one out of antler, I think. It is fairly thick. It's fairly chunky. And it's actually difficult to find a piece of antler that thick, although I'm sure we could come up with one. This saddle doesn't really fit the slot as tight as it could. It's not real loose, but it's not real tight either. So maybe I'll check with Brent to see if he wants to do that. Well, while I'm waiting on Brent to get back here and talk about this saddle, I think I'll do a very light fret dressing. You know, if we're going to lower this down, we want to make sure these are all perfect. And I can usually tell within just a second or two if there's high spots. And there are a couple of high spots. There's a little bit of a drag in here. The drag will be any place you have a high fret, and you'll feel it drag. It's not too bad though, it's pretty good. There's a little drag right about in here.
I can't try to pretend I'm not, 'cause I'm all over again. They say time will heal.
And I'm gonna knock off the ends.
You wish you were near. I tried to stop thinking of you, but every little thing I do makes me wish and dream of you.
I believe that's going to do that. I'm going to talk to Brent now about this option here, so I'll be back with you in just a moment. Okay, I talked to Brent. We're just going to knock down this one. He just wants this one playable because this is kind of an entry-level Bouzouki. He's learning this particular instrument as we're talking anyway. So I think we're just going to knock this down a little bit. If we do spend more time on an instrument, it would probably be on his mandolin that I think he has. So, and that may be down the road. But anyway, we're going to work on this right now. I'm just going to go over to the sander and knock this down. I'm not going to show that, but that's all I'm doing. I'm going to mark these. I would like to lower this side down just maybe 10 thousandths. So if I mark it at 20 thousandths, that will be just right. So I'm going to put 20 thousandths on here, and 20 thousandths seriously is not very much. Probably sounds like a lot. You can barely see between there. That's 20 thousandths of an inch, but it's measurable. So I'm gonna scratch across. I put some black on here, and I'm scratching across that black so I can see it. I can see it, but I doubt the camera can. And now we're going to mark it for the other side, and the other side is about 40 thousandths too high, so we really need to take off quite a bit on the other side. We need to take off about 80 thousandths. I don't think I'm that brave. I'm going to take off about 70. I think that's going to be where we're going to land on this. That should lower it by 35 thousandths, and I think we're probably fine with that. It looks like quite a bit to take off on that side, but I have to remember that this side is already quite a bit thicker, and definitely it measures quite a bit higher on this side for one reason or another. I'm just going to go over to the sander and knock that down. I've started recrowning these files. I've got a medium-sized file in here, and that seems to be about right for these frets. These are frets that are slightly bigger than a mandolin fret, but they're not a lot bigger. So they're kind of a small guitar fret, I guess you'd say. I prefer to use an oversized roundover file whenever I can, and the reason is that it just rounds them much faster. If you try to get the exact file for the exact size fret, it takes forever to round them over.
All over again. I'm blue for you, darling.
Now here, we're starting to get into those high frets, so there's a little more flatness on certain places. Now that one didn't have much. This one's got some flatness here on a couple of places.
I can't try to pretend I'm not, 'cause I'm blue all over again.
Back here, we really didn't even hit much. And I'm going to go ahead and dress them just lightly. I'm just going to knock down the very ends here just lightly. I've got some 400 here, and I'm just going to very lightly go over these frets this way. And the only reason is they're still a little scratchy looking with just the rough file. Sometimes they look better than others. These look a little scratchy, so I'm just going to go ahead and knock them down real quick with the sandpaper. This does a really fast job.
Every time you're not around, I'm by myself, I get to feeling down. If someone calls out your name, well, I get to thinking of the days gone by. You were standing by my side.
I like to rub my hand up and down it to see if I feel anything sharp, and it feels fine. So I think we're ready to string this baby back up and see what we did to it. And for those of you who don't string a Bouzouki every day, these are 40s, 28s, 16s, and 11s. I doubt there's very many of you out there that don't string a Bouzouki every day, but just in case there is somebody out there that doesn't know. I can't even say that without laughing. We've got Diodario strings here. These appear, and I didn't look, but these appear to be phosphor bronze, and they are. And I always, and I say always, recommend phosphor bronze. Phosphor bronze is by far your best string in terms of lasting. Standard bronze, for most people, don't last at all. This has the traditional mandolin tailpiece back here where you bend the strings and all that. I don't bend them anymore like that. I used to do that, but now I just hook them on straight, and I find it works just as well and far less complication. I show you the quick way to do this, and it's so much easier than what everyone else does. So all you do is you just bring your string up, put it in the slot that it goes in, and you go on the inside of the post, the inside meaning down through the middle here. You wrap around the post one time, that's one full wrap. You go back around about another half wrap or so, and it depends on how the hole is oriented, but you want to go at least a wrap and a half. Then you slide this back through over the top of the wrappings that you just did, and you want to make sure it goes over the wrappings, because what this effectively does is it winds the string down the post, which is what you want, and now you just pull this up tight and your string is already tight. You don't have to tighten it up. You don't need a string winder this way, and it makes the strings come off easy when you're ready to take them off. Everything about that procedure is really good. So that's the way you should put on your strings. Now that's on the bass side. You can do that on the treble side as well, but if you do it on the treble side, you should wrap it at least 2.5 times. More wraps on the treble side if you're doing it this way. We're gonna get these strings on and get them on in a hurry.
All over again. I move for you, darling. I can't try to pretend I'm not, 'cause I move all over again.
Now on the treble side, I'm going to show you a different way of putting them on. I go ahead and go through the hole like this, and I leave about this much slack, as you can see. You know, not very much slack, but you got to leave some slack. Just about the width across here is enough slack. I go back under the string, pull it up tight. That locks the string in where it cannot come undone. Now this doesn't tighten instantly. You do have to wind this a little bit before it becomes tight. The advantage of this is on these little skinny silver strings, they won't slide out. If you wrap them around a couple of times and do the same thing that I did on this side, you're probably fine too. I just prefer to lock these smaller strings. Then I know for sure they're not going to give me trouble. The big strings won't give you trouble. The ones that have wrapping on them, serving on them, won't have any trouble. But these small ones can give you a problem with slippage if you're not careful. So I just take that out of play by just locking them in there. These loose strings flopping around in the air like this is very dangerous. It can poke you in the eye, so I always cut them off flush with the top of the post. By cutting them off flush with the top of the post, then they're not sticking up where they can poke you a different way. If you leave them sticking up much, you can end up poking somebody or yourself and hurting yourself. I see people do all kinds of things. I see them actually doing art sculptures with the ends of their strings, you know, making all kinds of curls and goofy things. I've seen them put them in patterns and all kinds of craziness. And the problem with all that is that then they also buzz and ring and have sympathetic notes and things, and they, you know, people wonder, why am I hearing this extra vibration? Well, that's because you got all that stuff hanging up there. The only other thing that you should pay attention to when you're doing this method on this treble side is to make sure that the winding is still going down the post, that everything goes down the post. You never want the end of the string to be at the top of the post. And you might wonder why that is, and it's just simple leverage. You don't want that extra leverage pulling on this post. It just causes more trouble than it's worth. If you have it anchored down at the bottom, then you don't have that leverage issue. Okay, all the strings are on it, and you can see there that there's nothing sticking up. It's all a very professional looking job. All the strings are wound down the post. It's a very neat, clean, orderly way to do your peg head. So I really recommend that method, and you'll find that it's actually the easiest way you can do it as well. Got this all set up, and the action is right at about 110. Little hesitant to go much lower than that, and the reason is because these strings are not up to real tight tension, and whenever that's the case, you can see how much watch how much they move. Can you see how much it vibrates there? So if you get them too low, when they vibrate that much, you're going to cause buzzing. But I don't think we're at that risk at this point, and it's quite a bit lower than it was from the factory. So I think we're just about right on this type of instrument. These are not hard to press down because, again, there's not that much tension on the strings. You have to err on the side of caution, if you will. You get it too low, then you got to build a whole new saddle. And I think we're just about where we need to be on this instrument. Definitely quite a bit better than it was. I got everything done on this, and you can see the tailpiece. I put felt in there, so we're going to slide this up on there. That felt will then dampen any string vibration coming down from the bridge saddle there. And the last thing is I'm going to see if I can get Brent to just play a little bit of chording or notes or whatever he wants to play on this thing, just so you can hear it. Okay, well, Brent's going to just make some noise on this thing for you. He's going to let you hear what it sounds like. Just for the those of you who would care to know, it's tuned as a G, D, A, D. You can tune them just like a mandolin or a violin. Didn't you say the Irish tune it that way?
Right, the Irish, typically in Celtic music, they'll tune it as to G, D, A, D rather than the G, D, A, E.
Cool. There you go. Now you know what a bouzouki sounds like. Well, hope you've enjoyed that. Brent, do you have anything you want to say about the rental retreat or your stay here so far?
Sure. First of all, it's a beautiful place up in the Ozark Mountains. Got a really nice place to stay.
Good.
Comfortable and quiet, beautiful valley.
Yeah, that's the one thing about staying here is when you get used to sleeping here, anywhere else is noisy. Because, I mean, like, this is as quiet as it gets. Long ways from any roads. Hope you've enjoyed this. If you did, how about clicking the thumbs up, and subscribe is always good. Thanks. Well, Brent has brought me a second instrument. This one was kind of questionable whether we were going to work on it or not, but we've decided we're going to work on it a little bit. This is an Alvarez mandolin, a very nice Alvarez mandolin. It's really pretty, got some really nice grain wood in it. The finish is just tad bit tacky to me. It's almost sticky. And I asked him about that, and I think he used some of the Martin spray polishes on there. And I got to be honest, I'm not a fan of those, and I really don't recommend them at all. I especially don't get them on your plastics. It's not good for plastic at all. But in terms of this finish here, I think we can fix that with a little bit of Renaissance wax, and we might do that when we get this apart. I'm going to get the strings off of it. I'm going to pull these frets out. I'm going to lower the action down a little bit. Do a very light fret dressing if it needs it. I've looked down it. I don't see any problem with frets or anything by looking down it. And I know some people don't think you can do that, but I can. I've done it pretty much my whole career. And I don't really see a problem, although the file will tell me if there's any high frets at all, and that's what I use. I don't need one of those fret rockers and all that fancy stuff. My file tells me if it's flat or not. Anyway, we're just going to do a number of little things to this, so we'll show you what we're doing, and we'll do them as quick as we can. So here we go. Now that I have the wire off of this thing, I can see the fretboard better. And this fret right, and I'm putting my finger on it, right here, is high. There's a little bit of bumps and stuff on the edges here. Those high frets that I've just pointed out are going to show up when I run this file over it, I guarantee you. Really high right in here, and right about in here I feel something. Right, that's that one there, and maybe that one there. You can definitely feel it with this though. Once you learn how to feel it with this, you can tell exactly where they are. It's really pretty smooth now. I don't feel any, well, a little bit of resistance right there. But once you get it right, this thing just glides almost like glass. It doesn't sound like it, but it does. A little bit of dragging still right there. I'm going to work on the very, very ends and 45 the ends off a little bit. Round them a little bit. Okay, so that's all real good, plenty flat, I believe. I'm going to recrown those, but the first thing I'm going to do before I get into any more detail on that is I'm going to go ahead and pull these frets out, and we're going to scallop this down. I think that's going to be a big improvement, because once we get that action down really low on this, these are definitely going to be right there where your pick is. You're going to be banging them. It's pretty much a given you have to pull these out. It's hard to get to them because there's not much room to get this thing in there. You don't have to worry about tear out on these because you're going to be scalloping it down anyway. Alright, so we'll get the Dremel tool out and I'll show you how I scallop that down. Well, I've got my Dremel tool here with the fairly coarse sandpaper on it, and that's how I scallop it down. It's just done purely by eye and just by hand. I don't have any way to, do it more accurately, but I'll try to zoom in here and hopefully keep the work in the camera, because whenever I zoom in, it's very difficult.
I move all over again. I move for you, darling. I can't try to pretend I'm not, 'cause I move all over again.
Show you where I'm at right now. You can see the edge there. It's fairly straight. That's what you're watching. You want to watch and make sure that you keep this straight. It's probably a hair thinner right here than it is here, but you try to keep that really straight. And I'm watching both sides and trying to keep them equal also, so that we're not slanted to one side or the other. It's always good if you can file through to the point where you can get rid of these lines. And we've got enough on this one where we can get rid of the lines. Some of them you cannot. You just have to stop and fill it. But this one we won't have to fill. We'll be able to sand it out. So here we go.
I can't try to pretend I'm not, 'cause I move all over again.
Well, we got her cut all the way down, I believe. It looks really good to me. Now we just got to do some cleanup. You don't have to worry about that black getting all over you, because it just gets all over everything. So you got to vacuum yourself and the table and everything when you're done with this. Now that I've got this smoothed off, I take a straight edge razor blade like this, and I go at like a 45-degree angle like that, and you know, a couple of different directions, and that really cleans it up very well. That gets rid of all the humps and bumps and everything. After you look at it, you can decide if you need to take a little bit more off in places. Like right back here, it's still just a little bit high. And you can probably see there's a little bump right in the middle there that it's scraping. So when I scrape it this way, I find other high spots. So you just got to go back and forth a few times until you kind of get it as good as you can, you know. If it looks good to your eye up close, then you're probably fine.
I changed my whole life, no more corporate strife.
There's still just a little bit there that I can't quite get happy with, right in this area.
Put your alarm clock away in the drawer. No more conference calls and no meetings in the hall.
That looks pretty good. I think we can fix the rest with a little bit of sandpaper. We got some 220 on this. I think this will be fine. I didn't realize it, but the binding's loose on this. I was wondering why the binding wasn't lined up with the wood anymore. It's never complicated enough. It always has to be a little bit more complicated. I think that'll be fine. And then for the binding that's loose, what I think I'll do is just drop a little bit of CA glue around it. Hope I don't glue my fingers to it, pretty much is really what you do when you use CA glue. I think I'll try putting on this glove here. That might help me not glue my fingers so much. So I'm just going to put just a tiny bit of CA glue right along the edge all the way around this, because it's really loose all the way around. And I'm going to squeeze it back together and then just dab up the extra CA glue. After it sits a couple of seconds like that, then I'll just spritz it with the accelerator. See how you glue your hand to it there? It glued the glove right to it. There's always something that gets glued with this stuff. And now to get the glove off of there, you just take a little razor blade and you scrape it, and it takes it right off. It's better than if I was scraping my finger off of this, which could have been the case. This one kind of got stuck a little harder than some of them do. The glue ran all the way through, and it stuck the glove on both sides of it, wouldn't you know. I couldn't get lucky and just get stuck on one side.
No business to conduct in a bar, and no self-serving boss.
Most of it looks good. I've still got a little bit of glove underneath it there that I'm going to get out one way or the other. Even if it is going to fight me, I'll get it out of there. You probably can't see it, but there's gloves stuck up underneath there.
Or the threat of the loss of the paycheck that I've earned to find.
I think that accomplishes it. And then lastly, we'll scrape it one more time. Now that the binding is stuck, this will scrape the binding flush to the wood.
'Cause I'll be out on that ranch where I can reach the first branch of that corporate tree grown from on high.
These are all the little complications that you don't anticipate when you start doing something like this, but you just have to know how to deal with them when they come up. And I'm scraping the black off of this, because even that black dust will stain this plastic. It's crazy how it does it, but it does it. Okay, so now that's pretty clean, looks pretty good. Okay, I've got my recrowning file here, and I put in the small fret size, because these are really small frets, and that's good. I like the small frets.
It'll just manage its worth. It's a small slice of heaven placed down here on earth.
The trick of recrowning is you just want to knock off the squareness. You don't want to take anything off the top, because then you're changing the height of your fret, and you don't want to change the height of your fret.
Care for his trees, water his sun. I don't own it, I just rent it from God.
And in case you don't understand my processes here at the farm for getting work done, I have a couple of deals. One is you can bring the instrument, walk it through the door, and for that I charge $100 an hour, and it sits on the shelf until I get to it. Or the other option is to get immediate service. It's $125 an hour, and then you have to stay at least one night at my rental retreat. And that's what Brent is doing. He's staying at the rental retreat. The reason I point some of that out is, of course, the high dollar rate. I try to do this as quick as I possibly can. Now, some of you will instantly give me a thumbs down because I don't tape this off as I file this. If you did, you're paying $125 an hour for me to tape this off. I didn't make any mistakes, I didn't make any scratches, so why should I spend the time to tape it off? So there you go, there's all of those things considered. I think what I would do, if this were mine, I think I would just go ahead and buff these frets one more time with some fine sandpaper. Anywhere from 400 to 600 is good for that. I just happen to have some 400 laying here. I'm just going to take and buff this. Now, the negative of doing this is that it dulls the fretboard itself, but it makes the frets much nicer. It makes them look good, makes them shiny, makes them slick, and I also like to hit the corners, these edges right here. I'm actually concentrating a lot on these corners. And then you don't feel those corners. It does dull the fingerboard, but we have a method for fixing that too. You can file each individual or sand each individual fret, but the problem with that is it takes more time. This is very quick, does a really nice job. You can't tell the difference, and no, it doesn't leave any lines this way. When you're using this fine of a metal grit sandpaper, it's just as slick as snot on a doorknob, as I like to say. Then you can wipe it off like this. That alone gets rid of most of the dullness, but since we've got a razor blade here, let's just go ahead and scrape the fingerboard too. That razor blade's leaving marks, so we'll get yet another razor blade. You do want a brand new razor blade for that. I thought that razor blade was new enough that it would work, but it doesn't. The one advantage of doing this is, well, it cleans up the board for one thing, but it will also level out your inlay if there's any discrepancy in your inlay. It will also get rid of the little finger grooves, the fingernail grooves actually, that your fingernails put in the board. So it's a good thing to do. And it also gets rid of the glue and miscellaneous things that get stuck to these fingerboards, even at the factory. A lot of times they'll leave glue on there or whatever. I can tell you this process is a lot harder to do than it looks like on camera. I have learned how to do it over the years, and you really have to have a tight grip on the razor blade, and you have to move it so that you don't get any chatter. If you don't move it correctly, you'll get what you call chatter, and you'll make it look worse than using the razor blade. Now, I always take, and to finish it out, I take the corner of this and go along each fret on both sides, and that cleans up any of the creeping crud that's right up against the frets.
I know they won't miss me when I tell them I'm history. That's okay, for I've got a plan, and there'll be no regret, no hard feelings, no debt. Okay, and the last thing I do before I oil it is I take a brush and I just clean it off. We're all doing the best we can. So here is my last word. Some may think it absurd, but I know that someday you'll find. And this oil then is good for bare wood. It kind of helps seal it a little bit. You know, it helps. It really helps against moisture penetration, and you know, it keeps the wood from moving so much. But it just makes it look good too. Looks bright and, you know, black, real black now. Looks good to me.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and put the strings on here. We're not going to change out the bridge and the saddle in this case, and we're going to leave those on there. I did lower the saddle a little bit because I know it's a little high. I'm not going to show you the method for putting the strings on this, but it's basically the same as I just showed you on the Bouzouki. Got the mandolin strung up, tuned up, the intonation set. There's lots of little bitty detaily things like this saddle is very sharp on the corners. I'm just going to round all those off real quick. Then you just don't feel them. You might not even notice these kinds of things when you are playing your own instrument, but if after you round them off and you play one that isn't rounded off, you will notice it.
It's better to leave than to stay and to grieve. Instead of a paycheck, you'll have peace of mind. I don't want it to just manage its work.
I prefer to do it with the strings on there though, because a lot of times the nuts are loose and you'll push the nut out of the slot with the strings on there, then you don't have to worry about that.
It's a small slice of heaven placed down here on earth.
This file has a smooth edge, and I've got the smooth edge towards the string. I'm really not hitting the string anyway, but just so you know, I do have the smooth edge toward the string, so if I do bump the string, it shouldn't cut it. That feels better. I think we're just about done. This has already got some felt in the lid, and there's a piece of leather underneath also, which is always a good idea. But for sure in the lid, you definitely want something. And I think we're done. So let me just tune it up again real quick and I'll play it for you. We got it tuned up. You can see it's holding a pick there at the 9th fret. Before it would barely hold it at the 7th, but now it holds it at the 9th. You could almost call it holding it at the 12th. It's not quite holding it at the 12th there, but boy, it's right on it. It's right at that height. So, and that pick is only 45 or so thousandths of an inch thick. So that's not very thick, and to be all the way back at your 12th fret there and having it touching that pick. That looks good. The only other thing I'm going to look at is up here at the nut. Actually, these three pairs look great. These are kind of high, the G's. I'm going to double check there and see how high they are, but I think they're a little bit high. So we could maybe tweak that a little bit yet too. It's right on the edge of being just a hair high, so I think I'm just going to knock them down real quick. It only takes a second. They're real close. They're not very high.
I care for his trees, I water his sun. I don't know, did it just read it from God.
I didn't really take anything off the bottom. I only took it off the sides, and sometimes you better check it when you do that, because sometimes these things are being held up by the sides and they'll drop down in there a lot deeper. So I thought I'd better check that, because these slots were very, very narrow on this. I prefer the slots to have a little bit of play in them, because if you don't have a little bit of play in them, you get binding. Okay, it's still just a hair high, so we'll take just a tiny bit off the bottom of the slot here. You got to be very careful to keep your file level and straight. I try to mimic the angle of the peg head in most cases. So let's just tune those back up again. Okay, I think we've got this Alvarez mandolin talking the way it's supposed to talk. It's got a nice woody sound. Action is very good. It plays really, really easy. Really hard to play these days. The fingers, they just don't move like they used to. But that's really, really good, I think. I think the action is just as perfect as it can get it. It's just as low as it can be. Plays just fine. No buzzing whatsoever. I think it's as good as it gets. Brent, what do you think about it?
Looks great. Looks great. It's just really what I wanted. Really wanted
That's his
to
first
tune it.
look at it, so
Very nice.
good.
Thank you very much, Jerry.
Well, I think scalloping that out is definitely the right thing to do. When you get the action this low, if you don't scallop that, you will hit that for sure. You can barely stick any pick through in that area if you don't have that scalloped out. And that's the sweet spot. That's right where you want to play. You don't want to be playing back here by the bridge because it makes it sound too harsh. Well, I hope you've enjoyed those setup tips. Thank you so much for watching.